Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I heard people saying that you all buried little slips of paper in the backyard, writing down who you wanted to marry. My father looked at me with a smile in his eyes. But at that moment, the memory of his frail, deathly sick figure in my past life suddenly surfaced in my mind. If it hadn't been for Mrs. Zhang stopping me, I would have been able to see him one last time. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I couldn't help but throw my arms around Dad. I want to marry Ethan Carter. Dad froze. Ethan? I thought you had your heart set on that boy from the gang family. As I cried harder and harder, he gave in, unable to argue with me. All right, marry. Lucky brat, that Ethan. Once Lieutenant Ethan comes back, I'll talk to him about your marriage. That'll be in 3 days. I remembered clearly. 3 days later in my past life, I had officially become engaged to Jacob Jiang. But this time I wasn't going anywhere near the Jiang family. Wiping my tears dry, I returned to the living room where a whole group of people was still waiting for me. My childhood friend Michelle Chun ran over urging me to hurry up and sit down. This week's book club was supposed to be organized by you. How could you just write a note because Scott told you to? Can't you see he's been picking on you again and again? I counted back in my head. It was true. When I first met Scott at 15, he had pointed at the little embroidered surprise on my skirt and in a voice loud enough for the entire class to hear said, "Hey, didn't your mom ever make you one of those?" That was in the 3rd year after my mother had passed away. Behind my back everyone laughed, saying that without a mom, I was turning into a tomboy. And right when he said that, Jacob just happened to walk past our classroom window. I was so mortified I skipped school for an entire week. At 18, I snuck into the training grounds to watch Jacob practice shooting. Scott followed me there too. I vaguely felt someone push me from behind, and a bullet whizzed past my ear. I nearly lost my life. Dad was so furious that he grounded me for a full month. Thinking about it now, it must have been Scott. But in my past life, I had never noticed his hostility. This time, the idea of writing down names and burying them in the backyard had been Scott's suggestion too. He said we should each write the name of the one we loved. If anyone's wish came true, we'd dig up the tin box and let everyone share in the joy. It fit perfectly with the book club's love theme, so I went along with it. But the moment I realized I had been reborn, I immediately scratched out Jacob's name and replaced it with Ethan Carter's. Michelle wasn't satisfied. She wanted to curse him out some more. But when she lifted her head and saw Jacob walking toward us, she bolted faster than anyone. She probably thought Jacob was here to play matchmaker. She had no idea that Jacob's intentions were anything but kind. "Hannah, tell your dad not to look for a matchmaker anymore. I'm not going to marry you." Wait, how did he know my father was planning to find someone to arrange the marriage? I didn't. I stammered instinctively. "If you can help me be with Lily, I'll treat you like a sister." As he said this, a strange look flickered across his face, but it quickly vanished, replaced by his usual cold indifference. "But if you can't, then we can't even be friends." But in my past life, he had clearly been willing to marry me. Why was he suddenly going back on his word? Looking at Jacob's determined expression, a chilling thought struck me. Could he have been reborn too? His brows furrowed as though I were some troublesome problem he needed to get rid of. I couldn't understand where the hatred in his eyes came from. Toward the Jiang family, maybe? I hadn't done them any great favors, but I had certainly put in my share of effort. In my past life, if he hadn't insisted on being stationed at the frontier, I wouldn't have been left behind to take care of his parents. And my father, who got stomach cancer from years of overwork and didn't even dare to tell me, might not have fallen so gravely ill. By the time I ran into Ethan at the hospital, who was there accompanying my dad to his appointment, it was already late-stage stomach cancer. Mrs. Jiang might have seemed like an easygoing woman, but she was actually selfish and calculating. Once she realized my father didn't have long to live and that his authority had weakened, she didn't even bother keeping up appearances anymore. Just because I went to the hospital a few times to deliver food, she accused me of not caring about the Jiang family, saying that as soon as her son left, I began neglecting her. I had no choice but to write to Jacob asking if he could take a family leave and come back, but I couldn't reach him at all. Not for an entire month. During that time I watched my father grow so weak he couldn't swallow a single bite. his body wasting away into skin and bones while Mrs. Jang went around everywhere complaining about me. I was suspected of having a secret lover in the hospital, which was why I never came home. But if Ethan Carter hadn't been caring for my father, my spirit would have already snapped. Later, when my father died, I blamed Jacob Jiang. And even though it was fake, I believed it. Ethan got up onto the rooftop and begged me to live. My mind was in chaos. I told him, never mind. I wouldn't be a burden. What are you thinking? I muttered. The moment you see Jacob, your soul is drawn away. Ethan poked my forehead, pulling me out of my memories. I realized I'd been staring at Jacob for a long time. You heartless little wild one. I run around you every day, yet you never spare me a glance. If this were any other time, I'd have insulted you shamelessly, Ethan. But somehow I feel like picking up his ball. Oh, then I looked at you. Can you marry me? Jacob beside us looked shocked. He lifted his eyes in silence. Ethan froze. Hannah, you've learned how to deal with your brother Ethan now, huh? His confidence flickered. He forced a laugh. Forget it. I won't talk nonsense in front of Jacob anymore. Is that okay? Before I could explain, he grabbed the books I was holding and dashed back into the living room. I was left face to face with Jacob. Jacob's gaze was dark. Provoking me was useless. Hannah saved me. I really can't break her heart. Is that so? What a coincidence, he said, touching a scar on the inside of his wrist. I tolerated you. Because of you, I can't ever play the piano again. Don't you know repayment? He continued. Since you worry so much that I'll marry you, then let me scare you a few days. Rather than urging me, you should persuade your parents. After all, who wouldn't want a daughter-in-law from the Jiang family? I spread my hands. Michelle Chen's mother is Xu Xian. Her father is just a junior officer at a munitions factory, a post of no significance. Add to that Mrs. J's social snobbery. Jacob marrying Michelle would be nearly impossible. Jacob glared at me. Hannah, don't haunt me like a ghost. Do you think I'm afraid of you now? I stared at you. Only when I die did you begin to fear me. What you fear is I'll demand payment from your pair of treacherous lovers after you betray my sincerity. Right before I could finish the sentence, urgent voices came from the corridor. Jacob whispered that Ethan was hurt. Jacob really could get nervous about someone. I remembered in my past life when the message from his side came. His mother fainted out of worry. I was anxious. I went to a temple to pray for his safety, kowtowing step by step over 1,000 stairs. After returning home, my knees began to ache. The day he was seen off, watching me limp, not only did he not pity me, but he scolded me for resorting to superstitions. Better to walk well and cook meals for your parents. Hannah, you're no little girl anymore. Learn how to be a daughter-in-law. And now Ethan's hand was only nicked slightly. Don't talk about a recurring illness. Even leaving a scar would be difficult. Jacob looked as if heaven had collapsed. He took Ethan's finger into his mouth, running his tongue along it, as though terrified of hurting him. Hannah, you know Michelle's favorite book is Gone with the Wind. What did you mean by slipping a razor blade into that book? Jacob's eyes were bloodshot. He held Ethan and marched outward, his steps firm, burying a deep pit in my heart. Ethan's face flushed. He struggled twice but clung tighter. Every glance was filled with provocation. Before I opened my mouth, the door slammed shut behind them, kicked closed by Jacob. I froze in place. The hand holding the books clenched hard. Hannah, my hand was swelling and blood flowed. The book I adored hid an even sharper blade. Michelle still treated me like a rival in love, but there was no need for that anymore. This time I wasn't fighting. After Jacob caused that scene, the book club dissolved on the spot. Ethan Carter carefully wrapped my hand with bandages, practically turning me into a mummy. You really won't go to the hospital? Then this little master can only use everything I've learned to wrap you up properly, Ethan said, leaning close, his breath brushing against my ear. Baby, what will you do without me someday? I turned my head and the tip of my pen accidentally brushed his cheek. Then you just stick to me like a band-aid. I'm not pushing you away. Ethan blinked at me, his face suddenly flushing red. He gave me a crooked smile. I'm not going to be a third wheel, he muttered, sneaking a glare at me as if sulking. I couldn't figure him out. The next morning, one hand wrapped in bandages, I used the other to sort through the dowry my mother had left me. That was when Jacob banged on my door, his anger spilling over. Hannah, you had her disqualified from the dance competition, didn't you? His collar was undone, his usual composed appearance gone. I had never seen him so out of control over someone. I didn't. I pushed Jacob's shoulder, urging him to leave. With a thud, Michelle dropped to her knees in front of me. Hannah, I know the director of the arts troupe is your aunt. Yesterday, I accidentally cut my own hand. This has nothing to do with you. I'll prove your innocence. Can you give me back my spot? Michelle wiped her tears, looking as though I had driven her to the edge. You couldn't secure your own place? Why blame me for it? I couldn't help but argue back. Then a ringing hum filled my ears, and suddenly the world went silent. A burning pain spread across my left cheek. Jacob's hand, the one that had slapped me, was trembling. Hannah, you've gone too far. Do you really think other people's futures mean nothing? I only scolded you a couple of times and you went this far. We grew up together. Did you have to be so cruel? I stared at him coldly. The one person with the least right to say that was Jacob, leaving me right after our wedding to run off to the frontier with his lover. Was that not cruel? Faking his death to trick me into caring for his parents for the rest of my life. Was that not cruel? Waiting 40 years after I died before coming to my grave just to beg me not to haunt them. Was that not cruel? Jacob sneered at my bandaged hand. Hannah hurt her hand. And you bandaged yours too. Trying to make me pity you. Too bad the axe has gone too far. I shoved him hard. Get out. Blood seeped through the bandage. Jacob stared, stunned. Hannah, you. All my strength drained away. I should have listened to Ethan yesterday and gone straight to the hospital. It must be infected. Otherwise, why would my head feel so foggy? My thoughts so unclear. The world spun into darkness. Hannah. When I opened my eyes again, a head of messy hair was slumped by my hospital bed. Ethan's voice was hoarse, his eyes filled with exhaustion as he looked up at me. I glanced at the calendar on the wall. I had been asleep for an entire day. Seeing me look around, Ethan sighed. Stop looking. He's not here. Michelle came in with groceries. Jacob's no good. He looked like he was worried about you. But the moment Michelle said she was dizzy, he ran right over. If I hadn't dragged you to the hospital to change your dressing, you'd have burned up with fever at home. Do you understand? Enough? Ethan muttered to Michelle, turning his head for a second, looking at the familiar back of his head. Every memory of Ethan flooded back, shielding my dirty dress with his shirt as he gave me a ride home on his bike. Whistling at my window when I was grounded, standing up for me in my past life when I was humiliated, kneeling at my grave all night before leaving. Even after achieving success, still keeping my portrait at his bedside. The gifts with my name were secretly delivered to the Jung family's door after my death. The birthday presents he still prepared every year. 40 years later, I suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to hurry home. Waiting for Mr. and Mrs. Carter to come to formally propose felt like the longest day of my life. By the time I was discharged and back home, it was already midnight. My father had taken 2 phone calls, and the next morning he was dressed neatly, sitting upright in the living room. What I didn't expect was that the first to arrive was Mrs. Jung. She suddenly appeared at our door carrying 2 tins of malted milk. Hannah, how's your hand? My head buzzed. Behind her stood Jacob, looking pale, a strip of gauze across his forehead as if someone had hit him. Ethan Carter, who showed up at my house like clockwork every day, was just as cold-tempered as always and let out a low snort. After some polite chatter, Mrs. Jung rubbed her hands together. Hannah, don't hold grudges. Once you marry into the family, I'll treat you like my own daughter. General Han's children are such a perfect match. Why don't I bring up a marriage alliance first? As she spoke, she pulled a gift box from her handbag. Jacob frowned, but seeing Ethan standing off to the side with his head down, he puffed out his chest for no reason at all. Just then, noise erupted at the doorway. A crowd of childhood friends arrived with uncanny timing, like radar, and one after another, gifts were carried into the yard. A daughter-in-law as good as Hannah. We want her too. Then Captain Carter and his wife came over from next door. Our boy's got no filter. But truly, Hannah, you're the only one in his heart. Why don't you think about Ethan? Ethan straightened up for once, losing his usual playful air. Dad, Mom, Hannah, actually. Before he could finish, Jacob let out a cold laugh. His proud gaze looked as if he were waiting for a prize to walk right back into his hands. The air froze. In the silence, the only sound was my footsteps. 1, 2, 3. Jacob's arrogance shifted into disbelief. I'm willing to marry Ethan Carter. Michelle Chun started clapping first. Good. Congratulations. Soon everyone joined in, voices bubbling with cheer. Only Jacob's eyes stayed locked on me, cold and piercing. Hannah, are you sure? This is marriage we're talking about. If you really marry Ethan, then we're finished. Finished? Can you live with that? Why not? Just because we married in a past life didn't mean we couldn't separate in this one. I grabbed Ethan's shirt collar and kissed him on the face. His cheeks flushed red, his whole body stiff with shock. I'm serious. I'm going to marry Ethan Carter. And Ethan Carter, won't marry anyone but Hannah, he said, his eyes rimmed red. I had never seen him so serious before, and something inside me stirred uneasily. Jacob opened his mouth as if to say more, but Michelle ran up to congratulate me. Hannah, congratulations. Looks like your hand's almost healed, too. That's a relief. He still had the nerve to bring up my hand. A moment ago, Ethan had been overjoyed, but hearing that, his face darkened instantly. He stepped in front of me. Michelle, I don't hit women, but if you try to hurt Hannah again, I'll make sure you can't stay in the military district. His words made the air itself drop a few degrees colder. Jacob sneered. Oh really? Ethan, without your father, what do you have? You spend all day hanging around with a bunch of girls in the district. Think that makes you look good? His tone was vile. I had never seen Jacob so disgraceful, so ugly. Ethan clenched his fists and I silently pressed them down. Then I handed Jacob a brown envelope. He opened it carefully. Inside was my final warning. The moment he saw the razor blade, his expression changed. This is from the munitions factory, he said, his eyes flashing toward a trembling Michelle. For a long time no one spoke. Michelle's father worked at the munitions plant, so getting a batch of blades like this would have been easy. But my father had nothing to do with the factory, which made their appearance at my home all the more suspicious. Jacob claimed Ethan was useless, but that was a grave mistake. In just half a day, Ethan had traced the origin of the blades and how they ended up in Michelle's hands. People thought he joked around all day, but they had no idea. In reality, Ethan was the one in the military district who knew everything. Squad leaders and platoon leaders tried to curry favor with him, and even captains and battalion commanders treated him like a brother. There were plenty of uncles and elders who called him family. If he wanted to get something done in the military district, it was far easier for him than for someone as stubborn as Ethan Carter. Jacob ground his teeth and took Michelle's hand. This time I owe you. I apologized to you on Hannah's behalf. I told you before, she saved my life. No matter what she's done, I'll shoulder it for her. I gave a cold laugh, then bowed to me here in front of everyone. I didn't enjoy humiliating people, but compared to the injustices I had endured in my past life, this was nothing. I waved my bandaged hand. Not too much to ask, right, Captain Jiang? Your wrist. How did you get that scar? In a flash my wrist was caught. Jacob's eyes turned bloodshot. Ethan smacked Jacob's hand away, but my wrist was already red where he'd gripped it. I stayed silent as Jacob, under everyone's gaze, bent deeply at the waist. I'm sorry, Hannah. Please forgive me. His body trembled so hard he could barely get the words out. I nodded. I accept. You can go. The man who had done everything to escape me just stood there like he was rooted to the spot. Brother, Michelle called softly. Jacob turned and walked out my door without looking back, his pace getting faster and faster as though clinging to the last shred of dignity, dragging Michelle to the stadium. Where did you get the scar on your wrist? He demanded. Of course, from saving you on the frozen lake. Did you forget? You fell into the ice hole and I risked my life to pull you out. That's how I saved you. Jacob rubbed his temples. Blurred memories suddenly began to sharpen. He grabbed Michelle's hand, running his fingers over the scar again and again. Good thing you were wearing gloves that day. Otherwise you would have gotten frostbite. Michelle, soothed by Jacob's sudden gentleness, grew bold enough to wrap her arms around his neck. So Jacob, you have to treat me well from now on. I heard Ethan's planning to book more than 20 tables at the state-run hotel. We can't look too shabby. You're a captain. At least let me shine for once. Jacob stroked her head, but his gaze suddenly turned cold. You seem to love comparing yourself to Hannah. Michelle fiddled with her two braided pigtails. That's only because I like you, Jacob. My dad may not be a general, but my heart is steady for you. Not like Hannah. She's fickle. She used to follow behind you, and now in the blink of an eye, she's engaged to the staff officer's son. Jacob's silence was almost menacing. Michelle hurried to explain. I'm not comparing you to Ethan. You're so young and already a captain. You have a brilliant future. Didn't you help me with the dance competition? Jacob, do you still remember my dad's promotion at the munitions factory? Can you? Jacob let out a cold snort, trying to get my help again. You still haven't given me an explanation about the razor blades. Michelle lowered her head nervously. Jacob, didn't you say as long as it's my matter you'll do anything? The soccer ball at Haloa Stadium slammed against the goalpost, making Michelle shiver. Finally, Jacob couldn't hold it in anymore. I'm willing to do things for you. Today, even if you asked me to go to the battlefield and take a bullet, I wouldn't hesitate. But ask yourself how many of your words to me have been true. On that frozen lake, I clearly saw the girl who pulled me out was bare-handed. Where did the gloves come from? Michelle's face went pale. Jacob, I'll never forget that winter. I lost everything about the piano. I lay on the ice, pulling the boy who had fallen into the hole. Jacob was frozen stiff, too weak to help himself. The sharp ice cut my wrists, my palms, my fingers. I called for help in despair. No matter how Jacob shouted at me to let go, I didn't. My hands sank into the water. The surface of the water was stained red, splitting the world into two halves. By the time Jacob was pulled out, he was already unconscious, and I was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. From that day on, I could never play the piano again. It had been unbearably cold that day. So cold I didn't even dare ask if the boy I had dragged out was still alive. Only when he showed up at school again did the suffocating weight in my chest finally ease, letting in a trace of fresh air. But as the days passed, 2 weeks at most, I found I could never tell him the truth about saving him. Because I liked him, I wanted him to like me purely without any debts between us. I was 15 then. Now I'm 25, about to marry a man I've remembered since before I was even 5 years old. Ethan Carter. He spent more time joking around than being serious, which made those rare serious moments stand out all the more. The state-run hotel was buzzing with noise. This wedding ran entirely on Mrs. Carter's organization. I hadn't lifted a finger. All I had to do was stand there in the most fashionable wedding dress. Ethan poured plain water into my wine glass. Tired? If you're tired, stop toasting. I'll handle the rest of the tables. I shook my head. But right then my gaze met Jacob's. It had only been a week, yet Jacob already looked frighteningly haggard. His once handsome face was shadowed with gloom. Hannah, do we still have a chance? The wine glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. Jacob, don't be insane. But clearly he wasn't listening. While Ethan had his head lowered, pouring drinks, Jacob grabbed my arm and pulled me into an empty private room. Hannah, I know everything now. I mistook the person. If it weren't for me, you would have joined the arts troupe too, right? Saying I don't feel anything would be a lie. My heart still hurts. He held my wrist carefully. Ethan pounded furiously on the door outside, but Jacob ignored it. Hannah, it's not too late. I know your marriage report was just submitted. If you withdraw it now, it's still possible. I'll beg the office leaders for you. He clutched his sleeve nervously, his dark eyes staring straight into mine. I'm married. This is my wedding. The room was so empty I could hear my own voice echo. Jacob's hand dropped weakly to his side. Hannah, you don't know what I've been through. As long as I can be with you, it doesn't matter if you're already with Ethan. I don't care. Betraying me, deceiving me, faking your death, running off to the frontier with Michelle. None of that mattered. My chest heaved with anger. Ethan suddenly lifted his eyes, his voice trembling. Hannah, you came back too. Even though I didn't answer, it was enough for Ethan to confirm his suspicion. Hannah, what exactly do you know? What did I know? That I had wandered as a restless soul for 40 years. That Jacob had taken Michelle to my grave. begging me not to haunt them, that I wasn't so cruel. I never cursed Michelle with cancer. I wasn't like them. Even now, just remembering it made my whole body tremble with rage. Jacob gripped my shoulders, his fingers shaking. That was because Michelle lied to me. I thought she was the one who saved me. So, I agreed to fake my death and take her to the frontier. But I really did want to spend my life with you. His chest rose and fell violently. Hannah, I'll make it up to you. I won't go anywhere. I'll stay by your side. If your father ends up the same way he did last time, I'll help you care for him. I looked at Jacob's flustered, helpless expression, like a child who had never grown up, selfishly believing the world revolved around him, and I felt nothing but disgust. I don't need it, I said coldly. Cold enough that from the very day I was reborn, I had already told the guards to take my father to the hospital for a full checkup. Fortunately, the test results came back. So far, there was no sign of a serious illness. My father only needed to take his medicine on time. Jacob straightened his back. Since we're being honest, I won't hide it anymore. The thing I regret most in this life is meeting you, Hannah. I should have realized long ago that you were never reliable. When I was 15, I was humiliated in front of you. Everyone laughed because the surprise stitching on my skirt showed, and you just stood far away looking at me like I was some kind of plague. I can't forget it. When I was 18, I nearly got hit by a stray bullet from a rookie right in front of you. You were afraid I'd cause you trouble if I got caught watching you. So when I fainted, you didn't dare come near me. Didn't even admit you knew me. That was you, wasn't it? I had once believed it was because we weren't married yet. That if we became husband and wife, if we were family, you would surely protect me. But I was wrong. Jacob, you're selfish. You're good to people only when it benefits you. If I hadn't been the one to save your life, would you ever have come back to beg me? The tall 6-foot Jacob suddenly collapsed as though he had lost all support. I was wrong, Hannah. That was when Ethan Carter, reckless as ever, kicked open the locked door of the private room. Jacob, I warned you to stay away from Hannah. He rolled up his sleeves, his fist ready to land, but Jacob, like a pig resigned to boiling water, just stood there waiting for the blow. Michelle rushed in from outside, throwing herself in front of Jacob. Jacob, let's just go home. There is no us, you liar. Jacob's eyes were bloodshot as he roared at her. I grabbed Ethan's sleeve, stopping him. Calm down. Do you want to end up in jail like him? I wasn't exaggerating. The day Jacob and Michelle had their confrontation, he nearly strangled her to death. If two comrades hadn't stumbled upon them, Michelle's life would have ended there. Jacob had been hauled straight to the Public Security Bureau for questioning. The Song family wasn't easy to deal with either. Michelle's mother, determined to see her daughter marry up, used the chance to pressure the Jongs into marrying her daughter. Mrs. Jong, helpless, had to give in. In my past life, Jacob married me only to regret it, faked his death, and ran off with Michelle. But in this life, fate twisted cruelly. He was forced to marry Michelle instead. In the end, Jacob was dragged out of the state-run hotel by guards. That day, all the influential figures of the military district were present. Jacob ruined himself in a single battle. At my wedding, he offended both the staff officer's family and the commander's family. His path for promotion was cut off entirely. Mrs. Jong fainted at home from crying, cursing Michelle as a bringer of misfortune. But after something like this, what woman would still want her son? She had no choice but to swallow her anger. Michelle might have been unlucky, but at least she had a secure position in the arts troupe. Still, Jacob shocked everyone. On the very next day, after being forced to marry Michelle, he signed up to guard the border. From then on, I never saw him again. What I did receive, though, were letters and gifts from him, sent one after another like a steady stream. He wrote that if Ethan ever treated me badly, he would always be waiting to steal me back. He said he suffered greatly at the frontier, but if knowing that eased my heart even a little, he would gladly endure that barren wasteland. His packages included local specialties, jujubes, goji berries, brick tea, and the like. At first, I had no intention of acknowledging him. I was ready to toss his letters straight into the fire and send his gifts back to Mrs. Jang, but Ethan wouldn't allow it. Why should we let him off so easily? If he sends you things, I'll double them for you. Hannah, let him try to steal you. He won't succeed. Ever since Ethan found out I had been reborn, He became even more protective of me. It made me feel a little guilty, afraid he'd think I was only clinging to him because I wanted someone to treat me well. And while that was partly true, I genuinely loved him too. In the past, I used to think he was just a smooth talker. But isn't it right to say what you feel? What's wrong with admitting you like someone? So, I learned from him. Every morning, the moment I opened my eyes, I kissed Ethan on the cheek. "Ethan, I love you so much." And then the whole morning would be filled with his teasing, leaving me with no peace at all until I was forced to change my morning greeting into a simple good morning. Later, another letter came from Jacob, but this time it was news of his real death. When his body was brought back, Michelle wept as if the heavens had collapsed, while her mother busied herself calculating how to split the pension. The Jang family being dragged down by the songs was nothing less than karma. Michelle cared only about her arts troupe, never did housework, and often stayed out all night. When Mrs. Jang grew old and one day fell with no one around to help, by the time she was found, half her body was already paralyzed. Michelle had no choice but to return home to care for her, which meant no more dancing and naturally no chance for career advancement. Even that had only ever been thanks to Jacob's face. Michelle believed Jacob would eventually come back to her, but he was gone forever. The Song family began urging her to get a divorce. Her mother had already set her sights on a Hong Kong businessman in his 50s. Before bed, I gossiped about it with Ethan, and he whispered that he knew the man, already married with a family. The Song family wanted Michelle to become a concubine. I couldn't help but sigh. The Songs really weren't decent people. But Michelle didn't seem to care. She happily remarried, and before leaving, she staged a dramatic show at the Jang household, sending Mrs. Jang into such a rage that she died on the spot. 5 years later, when Ethan took me to a business dinner, I ran into Michelle again. Her belly was swollen, her face haggard, but her sharp tongue and vanity hadn't changed. I said a few polite words before keeping my distance. By then, I had learned the kind of smooth small talk Ethan used in business, enough to handle such occasions with ease. At night when we came home, Ethan would faithfully rub scar cream onto my wrist. And over the years the scar really did fade. He had matured a great deal. No one could ever say again that he was just an idle troublemaker from the compound. He treated me well, and he cared deeply for my father. Though life and death are inevitable, and I couldn't say whether my father might fall ill again 5 or 10 years later, I knew one thing. There would always be someone by my side. I would not face it alone. That was enough.